Hello fellow kaiju fans, it is Godzilla Productions TV, but I don't know if you heard, according to episode 12 of Ultraman Decker, the sphere can do anything! Oh yes! Oh no. The sphere can do anything. Alright everyone, it's October 2nd, so you know what that means. It's time to talk about Ultraman Decker in September. What? What? Shut up! I'll have Halloween special, don't worry, I promise. Alright, well I better get started soon because September there was 5 whole episodes compared to August, which had 3, and July that had 4. So there's a lot of ground to cover. And I do have a lot to say about these episodes, so let's begin. Alright, episode 8. It's time to tackle the beast. So I'd really like to know why they felt the need to throw in another plot point in an already very convoluted plot. That being the flower. Gajiren. While that would already be a problem, overstuffing, Decker likes to do that, it didn't make any sense either. How did Kengo make the same plant as some ultra ancient one? Like, I know they try and explain it like, oh, it was medicine, and when you make the plant, you remembered it, and like the artist smiles, and like, all that.
But how? What?
Why though? That is so stupid! Not to mention the story where that flower specifically came from. Like, it was some seed that Megalothor absorbed, and then the spheres caused it to bloom. Oh yeah, the spheres, they can do anything, that's right. The sphere can do anything. But they just came up with a bunch of nonsense to throw in a plot that they're not even gonna do anything with. The Narcidesi shoots the beam at the flower to take it out, Megalothor shows up, and then the flower is never brought up again. Is it still there? Why even introduce it in the first place if it's not gonna lead to anything? Literally, that flower plot went nowhere. I've never seen such an awkward fail like this. Like, if they'd kind of woven the flower into the plot, I would have forgiven it, I guess, if they had used that to explain why Chimera was good now for some reason. Maybe I would have been like, okay, well. But it didn't go anywhere. They didn't even use it for that. Speaking of Chimera being good, why though? Like, I appreciate the idea of making Chimera good. I think that's something that should have happened in Trigger, but I guess if they're trying to fix a mistake, I guess. But at least have it make sense on why it would happen. Like, first of all, there's absolutely no reason Chimera should be there in the first place, since she is Megalothor. Why on earth is she separate? Second of all, there was nothing that happened to cause her to be good now. Like, when she's talking to Kengo, she's like,
I always thought Warmnet was pretty good.
Did she ever actually even say that? It just fell out of nowhere. Like, again, at least use the flower you introduced to lead to that. But they don't even do that. It's so nonsensical. Other little things they screwed up in the episode was like having the hyper guns next to the normal guns, old guts versus new guts. The fact that they downgraded the technology and they're just showing it. Why would they not use the hyper guns? That just doesn't make any sense, not even a little bit. Especially when they have them right next to each other. It's not like it's outdated technology if she's still using it. And speaking of Yuna, she's using it right now. Hey, remember that whole massive plot point in Trigger where they were trying to say, hey, you're not Yuzure? And how Yuzure was always something separate to her? No, now she's just full-on Yuzure out of nowhere with no explanation. That is what I call good writing, guys. At the very least, this episode gave us a good fight. Episode 7 didn't have a good fight. This one got a good fight. I'll give it that. Still doesn't save it from the rating of 3 out of 10. Episode 8 gets a 3 out of 10. Now, episode 9, to a lot of people's dismay, was also directed by Sakamoto. And he's not exactly known for doing good tribute episodes. But I gotta give him credit, it wasn't that bad. Still would have preferred Sujimoto to direct it, but Sakamoto, he pulled through, made something good. It was a great tribute to Grigor himself. Maybe not necessarily the actual episode of Dyna, but Grigor, the character, he got a good tribute. I really like what they did with his character and the relationship with his daughter. That was really sweet. And also Sakamoto gave him a great fight, that fight versus Red King. Mwah. Speaking of Red King and Sphere Red King were really cool in this episode. It was a little unfortunate that we didn't get a transformation for Sphere Red King and he just kind of came out of nowhere, but it's whatever. Sphere Red King was still pretty cool in the episode though. And it's also interesting that our main normal Red King now is going to be Red King B. The references in the episode were pretty good. A good reference is when you take something from a previous show and spin it in a new way. Like how in Ultraman Dyna episode 31, they're all cheering for Dyna while he's fighting Grigor. Well, in this episode, they're chanting Grigor's name while he's fighting Red King. That and the girl taking pictures at the beginning, I thought that was really well done too. However, it wasn't shy of a bad reference or two. For example, the swords, Grigor's swords. They were just kind of there. In the Dyna episode, they had purpose. In this one, they didn't. So I wasn't necessarily a fan of that. Also, something that was a little weird that I noticed is that they acted like the Griffin hadn't happened before at the beginning of the episode. They were talking about it like it was a completely new thing that they didn't do yet. But it happened in episode 4. Also, that training sequence with Grigor was a little weird because it was just the planes firing bullets at him. I don't know, I thought that was a little strange. He didn't even do anything. He just got hit by bullets. That was it. And the episode had a bit of pacing issues. For example, when Decker goes to defeat Red King and he does the thing with the card monsters, it's like 15 seconds of him doing the thing with the sword, and it just completely ruins the tension. Overall, I'm gonna have to give episode 9 a 7 out of 10. Not bad, but nothing too astounding. However, episode 10, you know I always gotta give you those extreme scores right at the beginning, so episode 10 gets a 10 out of 10. What other score could it get? Now this was a great tribute to a Dyna episode. Like where it takes concepts like a crazy scientist building an artificial monster. It's similar to how it was done in Dyna, but it's done in a unique way. And it was meant to pay tribute to it. So, you know, you just gotta love it. It was awesome. I really loved how it was done. I loved Neosaurus from Ultraman Dyna, and they paid tribute to him great. The only thing that bugged me a little bit was that he had a mouth beam instead of the chest beam, which was kind of something that made Neosaurus unique. However, it did lead to a Godzilla reference! Can't complain. Speaking of the crazy scientist lady, she was also really well done in this episode. She's got some interesting and kind of valid ideas. I'm pretty curious to see what they're going to do with her in the show. Because honestly, her character has a lot of potential. This episode just felt really well directed. There was a lot of great shots, especially when Decker sits down the girl and she's running away and it pans up and we see them fighting. And there was a really nice slow burn pace to the episode, something very rare, and especially Decker, with how overstuffed Decker feels. It feels like everything's always constantly happening. But in this episode, it was very slow leading up to anything happening, and I loved it. It was kind of refreshing. And it wasn't done in a way like episode 3 where it was just, you know, boring. And the unique sequences in this episode, it really adds that extra spice, you know, when something unique happens. Like in a fight could be really cool in an episode, but that scene where Decker and Neomegas are rising out of the ground, and they each had their respective person in their hand, and there was the instrumental of the Decker song playing, and the girl from Godzilla is just on Decker's hand, and the camera spins around. She looks at Neomegas. Oh, I just thought that was so well done. It adds so much to an episode to have a memorable moment like that that you can't find anywhere else. So yeah, I already said it. Decker episode 10 gets a 10 out of 10. Decker episode 11. It was no episode 10, but it was still pretty good. It was a well-paced and well-balanced episode between the humor and the serious bits. I really liked that. Like, there were some good jokes being thrown around, like when Decker transforms and he's human-sized. I really liked that. But you know, there was also, of course, the risk of dying from the Hinabasters, so there's that. Speaking of those guys, they were pretty cool. The lightning abilities were interesting. The lightning effects, they weren't the greatest out there, but they weren't the worst either. And I really like the concept of there being a flock of the little bastards while there's just one big queen one. The shot where they reveal it is really cool. As for Terrafacer is awesome. I absolutely love the design of that thing. And I really like the introduction of those particle things that it uses to fly around and bounce attacks off of. A good way to make it feel unique compared to King Joe's Storage Custom. However, the episode did have some bad aspects to it. For example, there were some pretty iffy effects. Like Terrafacer's arm grip, it looks like CGI from the Mebius movie. The one that stood out the most to me, however, was the defeat of Raybasser, when Decker just flies through it, but they don't even show him flying through it. It was very poorly cut together. So in the end, I gotta give Decker episode 11 8 out of 10. And finally, we have Decker episode 12 with the best writing since episode 8. This is the brilliant episode that brings us the spheres can do anything! The sphere can do anything except bring me happiness. But yeah, that's gotta be some of the worst writing I've ever seen. They could do anything, why don't they give Decker cancer? Just kill him like that. Take over the entire world just like that. Kill everybody just like that. Become the god of the universe just like that. You can't just say they can do anything if they can't. And this episode brings Neomegus back, but it felt weird because there was absolutely no reason for it to be Neomegus. It's just a powerful sphere monster. It could have been literally any monster turned into a sphere monster and it would have worked. It was fine because I like Neomegus, but Neomegus had a lot of story behind it, and I kind of don't like that wasn't carried over with him. And this episode does something that's become a rising issue with Ultraman these days. The reuse of footage. Yeah, that's right. At one point, the sphere appearance, the exact same shot from episode 3. However, while they do reuse footage from episode 3, it appears they forgot it even happened. Because the captain seems to think the sphere's regenerating body parts is a new trick of theirs. Even though it happened in episode 3 with this boy's tail. Do you guys remember that? Because, I do. And that scene where Kanata falls out of the sky. Oh, boy, that was a goofy one.
Alright, in this scene, we need you to sound like you are falling to your death.
Right.
You got that?
I got it. Oh! Yeah, his voice acting in the scene wasn't that great. And it was very obvious they were trying to hide that he wasn't actually saying that when they only showed his back the whole time. It just really didn't look great, and there's really no excuse to, because we saw a scene pretty similar in Ultraman Z where Haruki and Yoko were fought. And that scene looked beautiful, it looked incredible. Speaking of stuff not looking good, there was a lot of bad shots in this episode too. For example, when Decker falls on a building right next to a big glassy one, and there is absolutely no reflection. Does Decker even exist? Is it a figment of our imagination? Kinda wish it was. That and the spheres looked awful. You know, if they could do anything, you'd think they'd look good! Maybe they could do anything, but they're not too smart. Speaking of not too smart, so is Sphere Neomegus. I love the scene where he goes to kill 2 Gut Select members, shoots a beam at him. Decker blocks it, but Decker dies! And then instead of killing those 2 now unprotected Gut Select members, Sphere Neomegus just walks away. So silly. You know what else is silly? The fact that he has Spherosaurus hands. Yeah, that was a really smart move, guys. So that kind of makes it seem like any monster could just have the Spherosaurus hands now. Which is a little curious because Spherosaurus was very obviously a Shepherdon suit reuse. And the only thing that was really setting it apart a lot were those big hands. So if it didn't have those hands, it would literally just look like a Sphere Shepherdon. Which makes that monster seem so much more lazy. And it also kind of undermines his appearance in the upcoming episodes 14 and 15, where it kind of seems like he's supposed to be the main villain of those episodes. Yeah, it was already bad enough bringing back the first episode monster that was defeated with ease, now to bring the appearance of Dynamic Type. But also, those sphere hands aren't that unique to it, so the monster's already a lot less special. And the thing with Kanata saying he's so depressed. Remember in episode 12, same as this one, of Ultraman Z, where there's that really well done scene of Haruki working out, thinking about all the monsters he slaughtered, and he just looks so out of it. Do you remember him saying, "Man, I'm so depressed"? Because I don't. I didn't expect this Decker episode to need to take so many notes from Z, but here we are. I mean, you should be taking notes from Z, because it's like the best Ultraman show ever. The least I can give this episode was that the Mega Buster scene was cool. Terrafacer shooting that beam out of his chest and then all the particles are going everywhere. Again, I really like those particles, they feel pretty unique. I also really like the force of it hitting Neomegus. I don't know what to describe it, it's on screen, and that's like blowing like crazy. That was a cool detail. While that was cool, it still leaves me wondering, why can't we see the whole Gut Select fleet at once? Oh, I know they had excuses for the Griffin and the Ursadesi. They were kinda lazy. If they're gonna keep having excuses for this massive, powerful fleet to not be able to be together until the finale, I'm gonna be very mad. Same goes for Decker. Why can't Decker just go over with Guts? Bring all his capsule monsters along too and they'd be absolutely unstoppable. And one final thing to say about this episode. It's kind of apparent that Takase is copying over what he did with RB. Especially with that Decker identity discovery at the end. Do you remember in Ultraman RB how Ouroboros was in episode 10? Not 11, but then he was in 12, and the RB brothers' sister discovered they were Ultramen? Compare that to Ultraman Decker. Neomegus is in episode 10, and then he's in episode 12, and guess what? Somebody discovers Kanata's identity. It's not necessarily a bad thing to copy over from RB. It's just a little suspicious, and I don't want him to get used to it. It'd be a bad habit to get into, to just copy over from his previous show with each show he does. And I do not like that it's already starting with Decker here. It's his second show. So in the end, Ultraman Decker episode 12 gets a 4 out of 10. Yeah, that low. Well, this has been Godzilla Productions TV. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Oh my god! The spheres are taking over the video! They can do anything! Why can't we see the whole gut select feat